Welcome to the Generation UCAN podcast, episode number 2. Today we talk to sports nutritionist Sunny Blende and open water ultramarathon swimmer Paul Lundgren. I'm your host Varun Sriram. The UCAN podcast starts now. Thanks for tuning in to the Generation UCAN podcast, soon to be available on iTunes. Right now, you can check us out at generationucan.com/blog. And we're thrilled to be joined today by sports nutritionist Sunny Blende and one of the athletes she works with, open water long-distance swimmer Paul Lundgren. Paul and Sunny, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having us. This is great.
So, Paul, let's start with you. A couple years ago, back in 2012, you attempted to swim across the Sea of Cortez. And now the Sea of Cortez is between Baja California and Mexico. And, depending on the path you take, could be anywhere between, 50 and 80 miles of an open water swim. Tell us a little bit more about this journey and what the inspiration was behind you taking this on.
Yeah, I a few years ago was invited to do a relay swim across the Sea of Cortez with six swimmers, myself included, and it was a 118-mile swim. We had swam for 36 hours and traveled, 68 miles, and had to abandon the swim because of jellyfish stings. And when I finished the swim, I just couldn't help but feel it could be done if we could solve the jellyfish problem. And I felt like I could do it as a solo swimmer. So I found a route that was 58 miles, and I was going to do that, but I learned from the locals that the sea conditions in that area are just outrageously dangerous. And so I ended up settling on a route that was 78 miles. And I've made 2 attempts in that location, one going from Baja towards mainland Mexico and the other going from mainland Mexico to Baja. The first attempt I made 24 hours, and the second attempt I made 21 hours before I had to pull myself out of the water.
So, Paul, clearly, was the first attempt, it was back in 2012, right? The first time you even undertook this swim?
Yeah, I think it was 2012. Yeah, so, and go ahead.
No, I was going to and you might have started saying this, but, for those of us that have never put ourselves through something like that, and in some cases, it may sound almost impossible. How did it become a passion for you? What was the driving force behind you saying, this is something that I really want to accomplish and this is something I'm going to set out to accomplish?
Well, I kind of fell in love with ultra marathon swimming. I did Catalina to LA, and I hadn't prepared well for that event. Not like I should have. I didn't, fully understand what I was getting into. I thought it'd be a 9 or 10 hour swim, which it ended up being, but I didn't understand what it would be like to swim at night in the ocean and doing that by myself. And it really spooked me. It was it scared me like I'd never been scared before. And I couldn't help but think there was something to be learned from that experience. And if I trained properly for an event, I felt like that process would take me deeper into understanding where that fear was coming from. And because I know that sharks are not fear. Sharks are, amazing creatures, and once you learn to understand their nature, they're quite impressive. But that fear is what's inside of me. And so I wanted to experience that and understand where that fear was coming from. And so the medium of ultramarathon swimming allows me to get deeper into my internal makeup. And that's what draws me into it. And then doing the Sea of Cortez, that body of water is just if you put your head underneath the water and dive down a few feet, you feel like you're in an aquarium. The wildlife is just prolific, and it's so beautiful there. The water's clear, and the temperatures. I don't like cold water, so the temperature's great for swimming long distances, and I just fell in love with that body of water.
That's fascinating, Paul, to hear you talk about it, from the perspective of someone who's undertaking this. And I want to, before we kind of tie you and Sunny here together, I just want to bring Sunny in to kind of introduce herself. And Sunny, for you as a sports nutritionist, what's your background? How did sports nutrition become something that you were passionate about?
Well, I actually started out graduating with a degree in dental hygiene, and after about 30 years in that profession, my hands started giving out, and I could see the handwriting on the wall. So I returned to college and received my master's in human nutrition, and I've always been interested in sports, particularly endurance sports, because that's what I do. And so I started tying the two together. And when you're talking about long endurance, you have to have some nutrition. You just don't have enough in your body to go for too long, although we're learning we can go a lot longer than we thought we could. And so I got drawn into it that way, and about 2006 I started writing the nutrition column for Ultra Running magazine. So I really started working with, distance athletes, runners in particular, but triathletes and others too. And then a few years ago, I started writing the nutrition column for Swimmer magazine, and the two just tied in together. It's a difficult thing to do, to fuel and feed someone over hours and hours, because you have an athlete that has changing conditions, and it's both fascinating to me and challenging to me. Paul is an extremely driven athlete. He drives himself, but he's also very responsive. I find he's fabulous to work with nutrition-wise. He tries things. He gives me all the feedback. And over 2 or 3 years of working together, we've come up with a pretty good plan. These attempts at the Sea of Cortez were not stopped because of nutrition, which is amazing to me. He swam 24 hours the first year. He swam 21 hours the second year, but went further in worse conditions, and really had, the first year had one gut issue, the second year had no gut issues.
That's amazing, and we're certainly going to dive, much deeper into that here. What I found interesting that what you just said, and in talking to other people in your field, that people from the outside may not always understand, is that from a sports nutritionist perspective, you can put together the plan based on the research, based on what you believe, but it's not always easy to get the athlete to follow the plan, or I guess even give you the type of feedback that's needed for you to refine the plan. So it sounds like, what you and Paul have is that nice synergy from the athlete and the sports nutritionist perspective, which is great, And then how did you and Paul get connected? How did you guys start working with each other?
I think it actually came through his wife, who owns Presidio Sports Medicine, Physical Therapy Training Center, and I'd been working with her somewhat. Both of them have worked with team and training for triathletes, and we got hooked up that way, and he started talking about the swim, and I said, do you need a nutritionist? And he said yes, and we sort of went from there.
That's cool. So I'm going to pose this question to both of you, and we'll start with you, Sunny. You said you work with all different types of athletes, and I don't know if this is true, but maybe primarily on the endurance side. When you look at, ultra marathon swimming, open water distance swimming, what are some of the biggest challenges that it presents from the nutrition standpoint compared to, fueling athletes on land, I guess?
Well, one of the obvious is, getting the food and fuel to them. You're working with somebody where every time they stop and have to fuel, they pretty much have to stop swimming. They can't be drinking out of a pack as you're running along as you can in an endurance event. because they're horizontal, they really almost need to get upright in order to swallow. So that becomes a problem. Working with any endurance athlete, fatigue of the product can be a problem. And I'm finding definitely over the years, the longer the person has been, the longer the athlete's been in an endurance sport, and the longer their event, the more and more tired of sugar that they get, because that's where most of our sports products have been based in the past. And that sugar fatigue or getting too high of a concentration of sugar starts to cause gut issues. So the problem is making sure that your athlete has enough fuel, not too much fuel, and making sure that it goes down in an easy manner, and the less often they have to stop to feed, the better.
Paul, from your perspective, same question that I posed to Sunny. What is the biggest challenge for you as an open water swimmer in terms of nutrition intake? And then I'd also actually, be interested in having you comment on that last thing that Sunny mentioned, just about, that sugar fatigue, as somebody who I believe has been, an endurance athlete for several years, even outside of the swimming.
Yeah, well, I came from a triathlon background. I had raced several Ironmans and tried to make a living in triathlons for about 7 years. And I've never really had a nutritional problem as far as digestion goes. I've never had problems with my stomach. And even in these long swims, I don't start having problems till about 7 or 8 hours. And, the difference, like Sunny mentioned, you have to stop on an interval. Like, we started at, the first year when we did the 24 hours when we did our swim on feeding every 20 minutes. And the next year we moved to every 40 minutes. And, whereas if you're on a bike or a run, you eat anytime you like. And, so in the past, I was very comfortable consuming, anywhere from 200 to 300 calories an hour. But when you're in the water and you're horizontal and you're eating on a set schedule and trying to consume those calories in a brief amount of time, because a lot of times you'll have to deal with the stopping, you become cold, susceptible to the water temperature. And so you want to make those feeds as quick as you can. So you're trying to pound down 200, 300 calories in an hour. After extended periods of time, it really distresses the stomach. And swimming, especially in seawater, there's salt. The salt water, especially in the Sea of Cortez, is really high. The salinity level is super high. And that distresses my stomach, because you can't help but accidentally swallow salt water at some point in the swim. And so there's a lot of, in laying vertical, trying to digest food, there's so many different factors that you have to contend with in swimming versus on land. And all of those accumulated, I started having problems with 7, 8, 9, 10 hours of swimming. And I had to find a solution that where I didn't have to eat as much food. And that's where UCAN came into the picture.
So that's kind of, Paul, I might have to have you switch seats with me and then host this podcast, because that's got perfect transition. But how did you, in talking about UCAN, how did you come across UCAN originally? Was it something that was introduced to you by Sunny?
No, I think I started learning about UCAN at the same time that I was getting to know Sunny. And we kind of both started talking about it, and Peter from UCAN had sent me some samples. And when I got the samples, I sent him an email, and he told me to try it. He told me that he had a gentleman 52 years old do an Ironman in something like 10 hours and 20 minutes on 400 calories. And I was like, there is no possible way that I could do 10 hours of exercise on 400 calories. And so Peter got me on the phone, and he said, just go out and try it. 30 minutes before you you do your workout, and eat 100 calories, and see what happens. And I didn't have anything to lose, and I was going out for a 5-hour workout, and that's all I had. And I came back, and I felt fine. And, I mean, I was in shock. I was like, I can't believe it. And that was the solution right there. And it's interesting, too, because I had to make a shift, a mental shift. And even in the first swim, the 24-hour swim that I did on my first attempt, I didn't trust that I could go that far on so few calories. And I think I ate too much because I did have some stomach distress, and I think I was overfeeding myself. And I really suffered quite a bit. So then the next year, you know, Sunny and I started talking about it, and we shifted it up a little bit. We went from a 20-minute feeds to 40-minute feeds and consumed considerably less calories and had great success.
So that's
right.
interesting, that mental trust factor, you know, in terms of trusting that you can and trusting that, you know, it will last kind of as long as the recommendations. And, of course, that's, you know, a tweaking process for everybody. But, you know, Sunny, even for you, coming up as, you know, being involved in endurance like you said you were, and maybe kind of being classically trained somewhat in endurance nutrition, even if I'm not necessarily talking about formal schooling training, but even just in terms of what you kind of had read, what everybody else was doing at the time. How much of a, I guess, healthy dose of skepticism was there even for you when you first heard about UCAN and you know, the ability for it to last so long with such few calories, relatively speaking?
And that's a good question because, you know, when I first heard it, I'm kind of thinking, was this possible? But I'm trying to think. I was writing an article on super starches for Ultra Running Magazine, and I just barely heard about them. And there's yours, and there's another one that works very differently than UCAN. But I ended up talking to Peter Kaufman, the same person that Paul did, in another realm, and you know wanted to get some of the studies and whatever. And he got me some studies. He got me a couple of people to talk to, and because of my biochemistry background, it made some sense to me, even though it was still kind of, can we really do this? And on our first 24-hour swim, Paul was on board, I think, more than he said, but you know, we were with a crew of 10 other people, and I can tell you a lot of those other people were not on board with this program. And at one point, when Paul started having some problems, you know, they were heading into their bags, pulling out all this, you know, other different kinds of sports nutrition products. And I think that's where Paul got sick. However, I was still amazed because here he'd gone 16 hours, and he got pretty sick. He really threw up. He really had a couple problems. And then he was through it, and he was great for another 8 hours. And we pulled him not because he was having any kind of swimming problems or gut issues. We pulled him because we were going the wrong way, and the current was such there was no way he could have swam for 3.5 days, which is what we thought it would have taken him to finish then. But I was amazed not only that, you know, he ended up getting too many calories on top of the UCAN, more than we needed, and that's what made him sick. And I was amazed at the whole process, although one of the things that we did that year is we had him going on plain UCAN for a while, then having a protein, then plain, then having a protein, but 4 hours, 1 hour, 4 hours, 1 hour. And after, you know, talking about it post-swim, you know, I'm saying, you know, you're not really hitting hills and valleys, et cetera. Your playing field is pretty even though you hit currents and waves. So I think we should add the protein mix in a little bit more evenly along the way, and that's what we did. And because Paul's terrific in being able to drink straight UCAN hours on hours on hours, not getting bored at all, but at the same time, you know, I thought he needed a little bit of food at the same time, something to put in his mouth. So what we mixed that UCAN with was egg whites and some avocados. and not very often, but that's all he had. And it was amazing. Really, it was amazing. Then I started using it myself. Go ahead.
That's amazing. Paul, yeah, go ahead, Paul.
I'm sorry. We also started introducing some nut butters.
Right. We definitely had a fuel called cross fuel, so that nut butter helped. Again, it's real food. More real food and just the UCAN. And he was on so much less calories.
So, Sunny, from the sports nutritionist standpoint, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but, I take it that the way you guys were looking at it was that UCAN would cover Paul's carbohydrate and energy needs from a carbohydrate perspective, and you were adding the protein or the avocado, the nut butters, and the egg whites to help him curb his hunger. Is that the way you guys were looking at it?
Right. A little bit of satiety in the fats from the cross-fuel nut butter and from the avocado. The egg whites just went down really easily. I also think that all of those work well with salt, versus sugar. So, he was swallowing some salt water even when, there's nothing you can do about it. So the salt on the egg whites, the salt on the nut butter, and the salt on avocados wasn't bad at all. And it was very even, just even fuel. And just through this whole thing, writing that article, I think I was interviewing Bob Siebelhar at the time, and I was also involved with some people at the Stanford Human Performance Lab and Endurance in Mill Valley on training the fat-burning system. And obviously, we're carrying, even if we're really lean, we are carrying thousands and thousands of fat calories that can be used as energy if we can access them. And by this fat-burning training or metabolic efficiency training, particularly with UCAN, because it fits right in there, we learn to become better fat burners and using the UCAN to just keep kind of pumping the fuel of our fat along. And it worked great.
So, in terms of calorie recommendations, if you can think back to how you might have prescribed a fueling plan, prior to using UCAN with your athletes, what might you have tried to do, in terms of calorie intake?
100%. It was a gram a minute, 4 calories a minute, 240 calories an hour, pretty much all from glucose. If you could add a little fructose in there, you could probably push it up to 300 calories an hour, just like what Paul was talking about when he was a professional triathlete. 250, 300 calories an hour. And that may work fine for 3 or 4 or 5 or even 6 hours, but when you're starting to get into the 20-plus hours, that starts backing up. You start having problems with that. It's not so much if you're going to have gut issues, it's when you're going to have gut issues, and what do you do about it?
What was the calorie intake per hour down to once you started adding UCAN?
Well, sometimes we were just 100 calories an hour, probably.
That's amazing. Paul, for you, what was that aha moment, I guess? You spoke earlier about, initially that first time around having some trouble trusting it because of kind of the way you had come up and what you'd done for nutrition in the past. What made things click in your mind where it was like, wow, I can actually, cut my caloric intake by half or more than half?
Well, it wasn't really an aha moment. It was just reality, and the reality was that for me, swimming, over 12 hours is stressful on my stomach, and I had to find a solution for it. And if I'm going to make the swim, I have to. UCAN was the best solution, and that was it. It was just like, do you want to make the swim? Well, you've got to solve this nutrition problem. And UCAN was the solution. Like I said, the big leap for me was that trust. And even in training, I had practiced, a 12-hour swim on 1,200 calories, and which I think is high for UCAN. I think I could get by on a lot less. I was doing swims like that. You know, I was doing 5-hour swims on 120 calories, and I still didn't have that trust. When you finally step to the line after you've invested, 18 months and $20,000 and put your family on hold and everybody on hold, I still didn't have that trust, and I finally had to just say, okay, now I have to trust it. And that was my big shift. That was my aha. It's just saying it works, and you just got to trust it.
So is this, you're using it clearly when you're in the water, when you're undertaking a big event, and how are you practicing with it? How are you using, what does training look like for you when you're training to undertake such a big swim? What does a week of training look like for you, and how are you implementing UCAN into your training?
Well, my weeks are focused on my big swims, and everything I do in between is maintenance work. I do a lot of strength training in the weight room, and hour and a half to 3 hour swims I consider maintenance swims, and then on the weekends I'll try to stack up some days together, like 2 to 3 days of going long. I might start with 3 hours each day, and then a few weeks later do 4 hours each day for 3 days in a row, and ultimately I worked up to 8 hours 3 days in a row, and was swimming 20 miles in each session. So I would go 60 miles in 3 days. Ultimately I'll work up to 12 hours 3 days in a row for this next coming adventure.
Interesting. When we're talking logistically consuming the UCAN in the water, for those of us, again, that haven't done something like this, take me through that. You're swimming to the boat and somebody's giving you a bottle and you're downing it quickly? Are you, what are you fueling at like shorter intervals, or are you really taking, a substantial serving of UCAN and then letting it run its course for whatever that duration of time may be?
Yeah, if I do a 3 hour swim or even a 4 hour swim, I'll just eat right before I go work out 30 minutes and just drink down some UCAN, 100 to 150 calories, and that'll be enough for me to get through a workout and feel fine. But if I'm training anywhere beyond that, if it's in open water, usually I swim in a lagoon and I have a dock that I swim off of. I'll stash my food there and do 1 hour loops and feed every hour. In the event itself where I'm out at sea, I'll have a kayak beside me, and they'll stop me every 40 minutes and hand me a bottle, and I'll drink it from there. But one day, by accident, I had some UCAN, and it was the plain UCAN, and I accidentally used the hot water dispenser. We have that instant heater in our sink, and I used that instead of regular water, and it turns the UCAN into a paste. And I was like, this is perfect. And because usually, I always have to shake it up to mix it. So after it sits for a while, all the UCAN will settle on the bottom, and when I stop, I got to shake it up and then drink it down. But as a paste, it holds it holds its consistency. And that was wonderful for me.
I assume that worked well for you because you're able to get it, get the carbohydrate you need in quicker, and you're not dealing with as much water in your belly. Is that kind of the way you look at it too?
Yeah, exactly. And then I can think about hydration, and my electrolyte replacement is another type of feeding. So UCAN is the carbohydrate, and then I'll have an electrolyte mixture that I drink for that.
So Sunny, go ahead, Paul. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, that's cool.
Sunny, I was going to ask,
I want to jump in here because that's one of the best things about UCAN, the first year we were mixing it with more water than he needed. You know, water can slosh around your stomach if you don't have a really high sweat rate, and everybody's is different, and the more you train, the more you end up reabsorbing your salts, and you're still sweating. But I found that the second year we mixed the UCAN with less water, and then we could give him water and more electrolytes. He needed additional electrolytes because, you know, it was over 100 degrees there during the day. But then, you know, he could take that as needed, so he could drink to his thirst as needed and keep the UCAN for the calories coming in. And that paste, he liked it because it kind of stayed in his mouth a little bit. Not everybody would like that, but there's so many things you can do with it. You don't have to mix it with so many ounces of water. You can come up and mix the amount with what you need. You know, I started mixing it less for myself, and it was great. Otherwise, my stomach jostled around. It didn't bother me, but it may have bothered somebody running beside me. But I realized I just didn't need to mix it with a lot of water. And obviously, you know, if you're running and it's really hot and you're sweating more and not cooling because you don't have some water around you, maybe you would want to mix it with more water. But you can change. That's the nice thing about it.
So what's interesting, which I'm curious about as you're putting together this plan, and you know, as you're kind of learning different things about how you can use it, less water, more water, you know, and then earlier you alluded to, you know, swapping between the plain and the protein. I think what we see a lot is, you know, if you got somebody running a half marathon, if it's not an ultra endurance athlete, if it's somebody working out for a couple hours, you know, you can really make things very simple, right? It's take it 30 minutes before. This is going to maintain your energy for, you know, 90 minutes or 2 hours. And if that's kind of the duration of your workout, for most people, you're pretty good in terms of fueling. But obviously, you know, when you're looking at something much longer, there's a lot of tweaking, there's a lot of playing around with it that has to be done. And even from the standpoint of, you know, needing to be ahead of the game with it, like not treating it like a gel where you take it when you're low and when you absolutely need it. So if, from your standpoint, you know, how long did it take you to play around with it, kind of tweak the fueling plan until you felt like, hey, I understand, you know, how this stuff works and how we're going to help Paul get the most out of it?
It took me a while. The best thing that I did was start using it for myself, and I ran a Catalina Trail marathon and realized how little I actually needed. And then when I'm working with especially elite athletes that are finishing in the top, you know, 10% of 100 miles or something like that, if they've got a hard place that they're coming to, they can take a gel in the middle of their 18-hour run somewhere along the way, and it'll be okay, and they can go back or continue on with the UCAN. But for most endurance athletes, like Paul, he wasn't trying to sprint past somebody in it. Like, he needed to be at this constant level because we're going for length, for endurance, not for speed or not for passing somebody, having changing conditions. But what I like is you can still change it around. So trusting it helps, but also you can tweak it for your athlete. You know, if your athlete wants to drink more, if they want salt more, if they need more protein. I mean, Paul's using every muscle in his body, you know, his total shoulders and legs kicking, and I mean, he's using everything to get across that Sea of Cortez. So he needed some more protein. And I think the sports nutrition industry in general is going with certainly a little less sugar carbohydrates and a little bit more protein, especially for endurance. So we could play with that. And when it came to night swimming, as Paul said, you know, he was never so scared of swimming through the night in Catalina. Nighttime brings on a whole different aspect to the athlete, whether they're running through the night on a trail or swimming through the night in the water. The conditions aren't really changing that much. It's getting a little cooler. But mentally, you have to look at the mental aspect, too. You do not want to have these dips in blood sugar or these lows, because at night, they go down, they're twice as low. They're twice as low, and when the sun comes up, they're twice as high. So it's the sun, it's the light that's bringing us, you know, our mood back up. But if you can stay steady, and I really think that helps through the night, both in any sport going through the night. But as the time goes on, that nighttime comes and those lows can get really low. You don't want that. You need to stop this from happening. So you don't want your athlete to go into a low blood sugar and have to bring them back with gels or whatever. Yes, that'll help the energy, but it doesn't always help the mental fatigue.
That's fascinating. Actually, I never that's an interesting way to put it, because that might not be something I guess that a lot of people necessarily would think about, or unless they're doing this type of event, that susceptibility to feeling, I guess, as you said, it twice as low, in nighttime. I did want to ask you one thing, about yourself, Sunny. Quite a accomplished endurance athlete in your own right. I'm reading from back in 2008 what an event you undertook. This is on the Ultra Running magazine website, where you attempted you completed the rim to rim Grand Canyon run, and just quickly, I'll just read a couple things from the entry you wrote about it. But when you were talking about planning for the event, you were anticipating about 200 calories per hour for the women in your group, and you yourself, in terms of your own fuel plan, mentioned that it was your plan to eat a gel every hour, and then 3 pieces of some type of gummy or block on the half hour. Now you alluded to the fact that I believe you said the Catalina the Catalina event that you just alluded to. How has your own personal fueling changed as you've been using UCAN yourself versus what you thought you needed and what you were planning to do before?
Well, I can tell you, I sure wish I could go back and do that rim to rim to rim again on UCAN, because for a lot of reasons. One, you won't have to carry so much. Two, that the 4 of us we're not spring chickens, and we wanted to see where we were going and having, enjoying the run at the same time. So we ran 17 hours, and, we did not want to see another gel pack for some period of time, or a gummy bear like candy. But for something like that, where especially like we were coming back at night and we were coming up the canyon at night, and of course, as the nighttime falls and as you're already tired from running across the canyon and back down again, and you're on your last, quarter canyon to get out of there, mentally that fatigue is hard, and you just don't want to eat any more sugar, and your stomach's not doing that well. We had to carry all our own water, so we didn't have an excess of water, and you don't want to take too much sugar without the water. So something like that, that's one thing I really find with my own endurance sports with the UCAN, is it just isn't the highs and lows. And I know Paul can really speak to that, because he's out there so much longer. And it's just not that roller coaster of up, down, and when you've been on that roller coaster and you don't perform that well, you start trying to take in fuel, I think, from talking to my athletes and my staff. You start trying to take in fuel before you hit that low. And sometimes you overdo it. And you're scared of hitting the low. You don't want to hit the low. But, then your stomach goes off. Then you just have to stop for a while and just wait till things settle down, and usually slow down before you can start re-entering into the, world of eating again. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I think for me the biggest challenge of this is this undertaking that I'm trying to accomplish is the mental aspect. And I'm really confident now that I've nailed the nutrition, and I feel fairly confident I've nailed the training. But the mental aspect of it is definitely where the barriers are. And nutrition is an important element of that, because it affects your mood, and physiologically you can explain why it affects your mood. But when you're eating something and the same thing for hour after hour after hour, it has an impact on your attitude, and that's why I like UCAN, because especially the bland, the flavorless, because I don't OD on it. It has no effect on me as far as taste, and after my tongue is swelling and bleeding because of the salt. I'm really thankful for that neutral flavor.
Huh, that's interesting. And Paul, Sunny, I was going to take this in a different direction for a second, but what Paul just asked, when he's talking about mood, there's research, that you see in terms of steady blood sugar, affecting, or you hear people, maybe I should say that there's research. I'll let you say whether or not there is, but you hear people say that they're cranky when their blood sugar is low. Kind of when we talk about stable blood sugar, which is really, if we were to, in a nutshell, say what UCAN does, it's really that it's a carbohydrate that keeps your blood sugar stable. How does that tie into mood and even mental clarity and mental focus?
Well, there's two kinds of fatigue. There's the fatigue where your muscles are out of fuel, out of energy, and then there's central fatigue where your brain is out of energy. So the muscle fatigue, you can refuel and you'll come back. But that central fatigue, that's harder to regulate. And it's the blood sugar. It's a pretty complicated biochemical process that blood sugar up and down starts playing with our hormonal, insulin in particular, but other hormones also. And as that starts getting into the picture, you can't just take a little bit of food and nix that. That takes a little bit more time. So the better way is to avoid getting there in the first place, to avoid that central fatigue. The thing with UCAN is, you can take quite a bit of it, and it just lasts longer. Where if you took a whole lot of bars or gels all at once, it would be too much sugar for your stomach to actually digest. And it would still be sitting in your stomach. And food sitting in your stomach does you absolutely no good at all and probably a lot of harm because you've got to get it out of your stomach, into your small intestine, into your bloodstream before it starts doing its good. So, when you have something that has a quick gastric emptying, like UCAN, like the superstarch that it is, that's a good thing because now it's going to get away from what could cause gut issues. But at the same time, it slowly drips into your system. So it's like a trickle effect instead of wham, being really high in sugar and boom, you've got a whole bunch. Even though endurance athletes or endurance exercise, it does blunt that insulin response somewhat, but not totally. And the longer you go, again, I said, my athletes are changing as they go. When they toe the line, you have a gorgeous body ready to do incredible things, and all the muscles are full of fuel. The mental aspect is there. The team's ready. 10 hours later, I got a different athlete. They're trying. They're doing everything they can. Paul has tremendous mental ability no matter what he says. But it's hard. And he's by himself. He's underwater. You can't hear people yelling and calling to him the way you can to a runner going through an aid station. And it's he himself, and that's about it. So anything that can help those hormonal possible imbalances stay in balance is a big plus. It's a huge plus. And again, it's hard to come back. It's much harder to go up and down, up and down. I've crewed runners in the Badwater 135-mile run from Death Valley up to the Mount Whitney portal. And, they are usually going for a couple days. And they can get, they can throw up, they can get really sick, they can get hyponatremic, they can get out of it. And we can bring them back, but they're not the same athlete as towed the line. So the best thing to do is to not get there to start with. And that's where I think Paul, particularly with time, has started to really rely on that UCAN. Just one of those things he doesn't really have to think about. Of course, you could have a problem. Your stomach could go off. Something, but it's like a 5% back up there. He's not really worried about that. He's not really worried about his training because he has trained. What he's worried about is that mental, is something going to happen? Can I make this? Is there another mental issue that's going to rear its ugly head? And it's going to rear its ugly head a lot more if your blood sugar's spiking all over the place. So I think that's a big advantage, a huge advantage.
And then it's interesting what you said because, you know, like you alluded to, I guess as well trained as somebody can be, the one variable when you're consuming high amounts of sugar always, you know, seems to be the potential, the greater potential for something to go wrong with your stomach, or you know, it just seems like it's a bigger variable. So in a sport where there's just so many variables, you know, in terms of the weather conditions, the current, what you know, jellyfish that he's encountering in the water, Paul, for you, I can imagine it must be a huge relief to minimize one of the variables.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's, you know, and it's like when I solved the jellyfish problem, and I'm completely confident in the product I'm using for that. The same thing with nutrition. I'm completely confident in UCAN, and I'm very thankful for it. It's a game changer.
I just got a couple more. I really appreciate you guys spending, you know, so much time here today, and a lot of great insight from both of you. Paul, what I had for you is, have you noticed since you've been training regularly with UCAN through this process, have you noticed anything in terms of your body composition, in terms of leanness?
Yeah, you know, it's hard to say that it would be UCAN or all the training, but
Yep.
I've noticed an efficiency in my use of energy that is actually kind of shocking, and that is I seem to get better at burning fat as time goes on, and it becomes you can tell when you get into that zone. You can just feel it, and there's a body confidence that you have when you're in that zone. And I get there sooner, and I can sustain it longer. And that's the biggest difference that I've noticed.
Sunny, piggybacking off of that, whether it's with you yourself as you've you know, used UCAN yourself, or with maybe other athletes outside of Paul that you may have worked with, so what impact, if any, have you seen in terms of body composition and you know, fat loss with anybody you work with or yourself?
Well, a lot. You know, I'm seeing my athletes get leaner using their own body fat for energy, which is great because you don't have to carry so much, you don't have to take in so much. And I think that even keel blood sugar helps you burn fat easier. With training, as you start getting leaner and your body's not taking in so much, your body's trying to figure out, hey, you know, I have plenty of fuel on board. I just need to make the enzymes that will release the fat faster. So you make more enzymes. You make more fat-burning enzymes, and you become more and more efficient at it. So what I see is, you know, I saw Paul get really lean. It was pretty amazing. So I see all my athletes. I got lean. You know, it's just, you're not hungry. You don't go up and down all the time. When you don't start spiking begets spiking. And the same thing when you're in even keel, it kind of keeps rolling on that even keel. And I think at first people don't necessarily trust it. I mean, I didn't trust it. I go, I need to do this myself. I'm going to put my athletes on it. I need to do it myself. And pretty soon it's amazing. You know, you're even keel. You don't have those lows in the morning. You finish your exercise. You're fine. You know, you eat your meals normally. But I think you don't feel like you're going to have to take that 2-hour nap after your workout.
So that's interesting. You're seeing the carryover just from from not your body being able to rely more on fat for fuel and not depleting those carbohydrates. You're kind of seeing that carryover effect even after the exercise, not just during the exercise.
Yes, I think particularly after the exercise, because we have a limited amount of carbohydrates. So your body's saying, hey, you're out, you know, calm down, slow down, take a nap, refuel. But when you're using your fat more, you don't have that kind of depletion stage. So your body's not saying, oh, my gosh, you're almost out of fat. Unfortunately, we're never out of fat.
So I got one final one for both of you to as we wrap this up. And Paul, I'll start with you. you know, so you're around this world, engrossed in this world, and I'm sure that you have conversations and talk with and encounter a lot of athletes. Have you at all, you know, whether it's just through UCAN or you know, as metabolic efficiency training is getting, you know, more and more kind of recognizable as there's more people, you know, that are experiencing the type of success that you and Sunny have talked about with the way you guys have trained yourself and the way you're periodizing the nutrition intake. Have you seen this, more people looking to become efficient in this manner, or do you still feel like a lot of people in endurance sports are locked into the, you know, that old school approach to fueling and that old school mentality? What's your perspective on that?
Well, I think that it's a difficult leap for people. You know, I myself have had a hard time with it, and I had quantitative results, and it just goes against what we've been taught. And I've been an endurance athlete for the last 30 plus years. You know, so tradition is ingrained in the way I think, and it's very difficult to, you know, cross that bridge. And I see that. I just had a conversation with a woman the other day who was getting ready to do a 24-hour swim, and she said, okay, I'm going to use UCAN, and she had all this other food included with it, and it was traditional sports nutrition stuff, you know, concentrated carbohydrates. And I'm like, no, you know, it's great that you have that, but that's not how UCAN's going to work best. And it's an education process and understanding how UCAN taps into the ability for the body to burn fat. And that's a hard concept for people to grasp. It's difficult for people to believe that they can go for 10 hours on 400 calories. That's just like unheard of. And you know, so that's a challenge for you to bring the masses to the light. But you know, once you get there, it's like, oh, yeah, this is great, and it makes sense too.
Definitely, and you know, I'd say, you know, a big part of the reason I was so excited to do this was, I mean, you have an amazing kind of efficiency UCAN success story, and it's fascinating to hear both of you guys detail this, but it's also fascinating because both of you guys have tried it the other way too. You know, you've both done it both ways, so I think you can both offer a very unique perspective, you know, kind of a well-rounded perspective. And Sunny, so similarly to you, I mean, you know, what are you seeing as you work with all sorts of athletes, and you're also, you know, very much plugged into a lot of different, you know, organizations with sports nutritionists and sports dietitians. Is this idea of the metabolic efficiency, not needing to rely on, you know, so many calories and so many carbohydrates and sugars and hours, is this gaining steam?
Yeah, it's very misunderstood. It's really hard to get across metabolic efficiency because, yes, you're taking away some of the carbohydrates, and you also need to train at a different level while you're building up your fat-burning enzymes. If you go out and try and hammer something and you take away all your carbohydrates, you're going to bonk. So once you become trained, you might not. But I think people are doing this more and more. That's not to say there's not a place for the gels and the drinks, particularly the hydration drinks with electrolytes and bars for having in your car if you forgot all your food afterwards or whatever. But there's, you know, you can do a couple hour event on all of that, and it probably works out very fine. If you have a real lean athlete, they're not worried about you're a good carb burner, fine. But for many of us, not at all as lean as we should be or want to be, and we are having stomach issues, and this is a great product for just alleviating those problems. But I think it is difficult. It is difficult. It didn't hurt that Meb won Boston this year. So maybe people will take a look at that. But, you know, I think it's it's just hard. And then people don't understand that you can't just, okay, I'm going to try this. Every third hour I'm going to use UCAN. And then they're using other things in between, because that might not work. That's not how the studies have been done. It's not how the product is supposed to be used. I don't know exactly what happens if somebody does that a lot. I think they're probably getting too many calories in the wrong place. But so I think it's slowly coming around. Certainly metabolic efficiency, fat burning is definitely new keywords, new out there in nutrition, and hydration has changed somewhat. So I think we're getting there, but you do have your job cut out for you.
No question. Well, we rely on great storytellers like you and Paul to show people what can be done with it. And I guess in closing, Sunny, you've done a lot of fascinating writing on various topics in sports nutrition. Where's the best place for people if they want to find your work? If they're listening to us today and they're intrigued by a lot of stuff, they can say, where's the best place for people to read more of what you're putting out there?
Well, one is to go to the Ultra Running magazine website, because there's a whole archive of my articles on there. There are some on Swimmer magazine. I haven't been writing for as long for that, and it's not as much endurance. Those are two places. There's some YouTube videos on super starches that I know are out there. So I would say those two places. And Bob Siebelhardt's Metabolic Efficiency book is great. It's out of print now, but I think there's an e-book out. If people want to understand the whole concept. But I think your website has a lot on it. I think going to UCAN.com.
No question. And if people wanted to work with you from the nutrition standpoint, are you accepting athletes? Do you have time in your busy schedule to take on more athletes?
I do talks now, and I do writing now, and I don't do individual consultations, but my colleague, who's also on my website, Sarah, does exactly that, and she has time, and she's great.
Awesome. And so how do people find you there? What's the website?
Go to eat4fitness.com and go to contact, and you'll see my information and Sarah Koziak's information.
Excellent. And that's Eat4Fitness with number 4, correct?
With the number 4, correct.
Eat4Fitness. Excellent. So anyone listening to this, if you are interested in a lot of what Sunny said, then that's definitely where you can check her out and get more plugged in. Paul, I know for you, this journey is going to, you're gonna be taking another crack at it. So, fill us in on what's coming up next for you. As of now, what's the plan? When are you going to undertake this again?
Well, I've gone back and really kind of disassembled my thoughts on how the swim can be done, and basically started from scratch. And decided that I've been looking at it the wrong way. I was always looking at the shortest route. And what I continually find that I'm struggling with are the currents. And so I started analyzing the currents more and more, and this has turned from a 80-mile swim into a 110-mile swim. And so the next time I make the attempt, I'm going to be swimming with currents and attempting a 110-mile swim.
Is there any?
That should be June, right around June, summer solstice, June 21st of 2016. So I'm going to really explore more 24-hour swims in the next 24 months, and just get a little more comfortable with being stretched out there a bit and change up my training a little bit.
So when we're talking about this new route, 110-mile swim, what's a reasonable, as you're approaching this from a training standpoint, what's a reasonable, length of time that you have to build up to in order to feel comfortable that you're fully trained for that?
Well, I want to be comfortable with 3 consecutive days of 12-hour swims, so that would be, 20-plus mile swims 3 days in a row. I want to have at least 3 days, 3 24-hour swims under my belt before leading up to it within an 8-month period. And mainly I'm working on the mind and the state of mind, and trying to change my attitude when I get into situations that are really challenging. and how I talk to myself. And that's a real interesting project for me.
Well, I think, from what I can gather and talking to you, from what I've read about you on your website, and what Sunny said too, I think you're probably a heck of a lot more mentally tough than you give yourself credit for, but I can understand, I'm sure that any of this requires even a greater level of mental toughness than people can imagine. So Paul, I know that people can follow your journey as well. What's the best way for people to stay plugged in to what you're doing and keep track of, your latest undertaking?
Yeah, as I start to build up, more talking about the swim over probably in the next 6 months and building up towards the start, swimcortez.com is my website, and people will be able to learn about that and what I'm doing there.
So that's Swim Cortez with a Z, swimcortez.com. You can follow Paul. Paul and Sunny, this is great. I really, again, appreciate the wealth of information you guys both brought to this from a variety of different perspectives, and I hope we can do this again sometime. It sounds like there's a lot of exciting things that you both are undertaking. So look forward to meeting you both and chatting with you both again.
Okay, great. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you guys so much. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks to everybody who tuned in to listen to Paul and Sunny's story here. As we mentioned, you can check out Sunny's website at eat4fitness.com to learn more about what she's doing and see how you can get involved with her. For more info on Paul's swim, which will really ramp up in the next 6 months, there'll be a lot more new content. You can check out Swim Cortez with a Z, swimcortez.com. I'm Varun Sriram. Thanks for listening to the Generation UCAN podcast.